What if I told you that a single photograph, forgotten in a basement for 30 years, would expose one of the most chilling disappearances in American history? A case so disturbing that when the truth finally emerged, it would shake an entire community to its core and prove that sometimes the most horrifying secrets are hiding in plain sight. Picture this. It's a crisp fall morning in 1994, and 9-year-old Sarah Collins is practically bouncing with excitement as she gets ready for school. Has this ever happened to you as a child? That pure joy of picture day, when you get to wear your very best outfit and smile for a photograph that will capture that moment forever? Sarah had chosen her favorite blue dress, the one with the delicate flower buttons her grandmother had sewn on by hand. Her mother had carefully curled her honey-colored hair, and Sarah couldn't wait to see how grown-up she would look in her school portrait. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. At Pine Ridge Elementary in Wisconsin, the morning buzz was infectious. Mrs. Margaret Stone, Sarah's second-grade teacher, was trying her best to contain the excitement of 23-7 and 8-year-olds who were more interested in checking their appearance than paying attention to math lessons. The school photographer had arrived early, setting up his equipment in the multi-purpose room, and one by one, the children would be called to have their pictures taken. Sarah was third in line when her turn came. She walked confidently to the designated spot, sat up straight just like her mother had taught her, and waited for the camera's flash. But what you're about to discover might surprise you. That photograph would become the last official record of Sarah Collins as a free child. By 2:15 that afternoon, she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only her pink lunchbox and a classroom full of bewildered classmates who kept asking where their friend had gone. For 30 years, this case haunted the small Wisconsin community. Search parties combed through forests, investigators followed every lead, and Sarah's parents never stopped hoping their daughter would come home. The case eventually went cold, filed away with thousands of other unsolved disappearances that plague law enforcement agencies across the country. But sometimes the universe has a way of revealing its secrets when we least expect it. In November 2024, 73-year-old David Morrison was cleaning out his basement after his wife's passing when he stumbled upon something that would change everything. Hidden among boxes of old photography equipment was a single roll of undeveloped film, labeled simply Pine Ridge Elementary, 1994. Morrison had completely forgotten about this roll. After 3 decades in storage, he almost threw it away. But something made him pause. Something made him decide to develop just one more roll of film in his dusty darkroom. Stay with me until the end, because what emerged from that chemical bath would not only solve Sarah's disappearance but reveal a web of deception so twisted that it defies belief. What Morrison saw in that final frame would make him call the police immediately, his hands trembling as he held what appeared to be the most disturbing photograph he had ever developed in his 50-year career. Frame 25 showed Sarah Collins, but this wasn't the cheerful school portrait anyone expected to see. Sarah's expression was one of pure terror, her wide eyes reflecting a recognition that no 9-year-old should ever experience. Her small face was frozen in a moment of dawning realization that something was terribly, horribly wrong. But what made Morrison's blood run cold wasn't just Sarah's expression. It was what appeared behind her in the shadows. A hand. A scarred, burned hand resting possessively on Sarah's tiny shoulder. The skin was mottled and twisted, clearly damaged by some past trauma, with deep grooves and shiny patches that spoke of severe burns. This hand belonged to someone who had no business being anywhere near that photography session. Someone who wasn't supposed to exist in that moment. The revelation hit Morrison like a physical blow. 30 years ago, Sarah hadn't simply wandered off. Someone had been there with her, someone who had managed to position themselves perfectly outside the camera's main focus, lurking in the shadows like a predator waiting for the perfect moment. The transformation this single photograph brought to the case was immediate and profound. Within hours of Morrison's call to the Pine Ridge Police Department, what had been a cold case gathering dust in filing cabinets suddenly became the department's top priority. The hidden truth that had remained buried for 3 decades was finally beginning to surface, and the impact would be far more devastating than anyone could have imagined. If stories like Sarah's speak to you, if you believe these cases deserve the deep investigation and respectful storytelling they rarely get, then you'll love what we do here. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that refuses to let important stories fade into forgotten files. This is where real cases get the attention they deserve. Detective Lisa Rodriguez felt her heart racing as she stared at the photograph spread across her desk. This case wasn't just another assignment for her, it was deeply personal. She had been 8 years old, sitting in the classroom right next to Sarah's when everything happened. She remembered the sudden lockdown, the way teachers whispered in hallways with worried expressions, the empty desk that seemed to haunt their classroom for weeks afterward. As a child, she had made a promise to herself that someday she would find out what really happened to Sarah Collins. Now, 26 years into her law enforcement career, that childhood promise was about to become her most important mission. The mindset shift was profound. This wasn't about solving just any missing person's case. This was about confronting the demons that had shaped her entire journey into law enforcement. Rodriguez had become a detective, partly because of that terrifying day when her classmates simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and a community forever changed. The decisions she had made throughout her career, the cases she had chosen to pursue, the relentless drive to protect children, it all traced back to that autumn morning in 1994 when innocents died in the hallways of Pine Ridge Elementary. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a straightforward, reopened investigation, Rodriguez was battling her own memories and emotions. She could still picture Sarah's smile from that morning, the way she had proudly shown off her blue dress with the flower buttons. The revelation that someone had been stalking Sarah, someone close enough to touch her during what should have been the safest possible moment, filled Rodriguez with a determination that bordered on obsession. The transformation Rodriguez experienced when she started digging deeper into the school records was nothing short of shocking. What she discovered would forever change her understanding of trust, betrayal, and the hidden networks that can exist right under our noses. The journey began with a simple question: who else had access to the school that day besides the photographer? As Rodriguez meticulously combed through attendance logs and employment records from October 1994, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Mrs. Margaret Stone, Sarah's own teacher, had signed in a temporary janitor that day using the name Blake Carter. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just any random worker. Blake Carter was actually Thomas Stone, Margaret's brother, working under a completely fabricated identity. The mindset behind such deception became clearer as Rodriguez dug deeper into Thomas Stone's background. Her investigation revealed that he had been arrested in 1983 for attempted child abduction, though the charges were mysteriously dropped when the victim refused to testify. The impact of this discovery was staggering. Margaret Stone had knowingly brought a man with a history of targeting children into a school environment, then deliberately concealed his presence from investigators. For 30 years, behind the scenes of what appeared to be a caring teacher's classroom, Margaret had been harboring a dangerous secret. The decisions she made that day weren't born of ignorance. They were calculated choices to protect her brother at the expense of her students' safety. The hidden truth was that the very person entrusted with Sarah's education and protection had potentially delivered her into the hands of a predator. But Rodriguez's revelations were far from over. Armed with search warrants and ground-penetrating radar equipment, the investigative team returned to Pine Ridge Elementary, now converted into a community center. What they discovered behind the multipurpose room would shatter any remaining illusions about that tragic day. A janitor's closet that had been sealed and walled off years earlier contained evidence that would rewrite the entire timeline of Sarah's disappearance. Inside this cramped, forgotten space, investigators found more than just old cleaning supplies and cobwebs. There, yellowed with age and barely visible in the dusty air, was a calendar from October 1994. The date of Sarah's disappearance, October 15th, was circled in red ink like a sick countdown to a planned event. The transformation from random tragedy to premeditated crime was complete, and the impact on Rodriguez was profound. The revelation that Sarah had likely been concealed within the very walls of her own school added a layer of horror that even seasoned investigators struggled to process. The journey from that first disturbing photograph to this physical evidence created a chilling narrative of planning, deception, and unthinkable betrayal. The hidden truth was emerging piece by piece, each discovery more disturbing than the last. The ground-penetrating radar revealed something that defied all logical explanation: a hidden chamber measuring 6 by 10 feet, completely concealed behind the janitor's closet. The transformation from a simple, missing persons case to something far more sinister was now undeniable. When investigators finally broke through the wall, they uncovered a space that had been deliberately constructed to imprison a child. If you felt that connection we built together exploring Sarah's story, if this hit you the way it hit me, then A like would mean the world. It tells me that this kind of storytelling matters to you, and it helps these important stories reach people who need to hear them. The mindset required to create such a horrific prison was beyond comprehension. Every inch of the chamber was lined with foam insulation, designed to muffle sound and prevent any cries for help from reaching the outside world. The impact of seeing this space hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. This wasn't a random act of violence, but a meticulously planned prison designed specifically for long-term captivity. Inside this nightmare chamber, investigators discovered evidence that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. A small pink blanket lay crumpled in one corner, and scratched into the foam walls were desperate fingernail marks spelling out the same word over and over again: help. The revelation that Sarah had spent unknown hours clawing at these walls, trying to communicate her terror to a world that couldn't hear her, was almost unbearable to process. But perhaps the most significant discovery was a disposable camera labeled in childish handwriting: "Property of Princess. Do not touch." The hidden truth contained within this simple plastic device would provide the most damning evidence of all. Behind the scenes of Sarah's disappearance lay a calculated campaign of psychological manipulation and abuse that was far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The journey through those 27 photographs was like descending into the darkest corners of human cruelty. Each image documented Sarah's captivity in excruciating detail, showing her alive but clearly terrified, sometimes forced to wear a plastic tiara as part of some twisted game. The same scarred, burned hand from the original school photograph appeared in multiple frames, confirming that her captor had remained with her throughout her imprisonment. The transformation these photographs revealed in Sarah herself was heartbreaking. In early images, she still looked like the confident little girl who had proudly worn her blue dress to school. But as the sequence progressed, the light in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a hollow resignation that no child should ever experience. The decisions her captor was forcing her to make, the degradation he was subjecting her to, were systematically breaking down her sense of self. One photograph in particular demonstrated the psychological manipulation at its most insidious. Sarah was shown holding a handwritten note that read, "For Daddy," suggesting that her captor had convinced her to view him as a father figure. The impact of this revelation was staggering. This wasn't just physical imprisonment, but a deliberate attempt to rewrite a child's understanding of reality itself. The investigation's journey led Rodriguez and her team to a remote hunting cabin where they uncovered evidence that would redefine their understanding of psychological warfare against children. Hidden among dusty equipment and forgotten memories were VHS tapes labeled "Princess Room," each one a chilling testament to the systematic destruction of a child's identity. The transformation in Sarah's voice across these recordings was perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire investigation. The tapes revealed a calculated campaign of psychological manipulation designed to erase Sarah Collins entirely and replace her with someone else, someone compliant, grateful, and completely dependent on her captor. The mindset behind such methodical cruelty spoke to a level of planning that went far beyond opportunistic crime. Sarah's small voice could be heard, reciting phrases that no child should ever have to say. "I was good today. I didn't cry when you left me alone. I remembered the rules. The impact of hearing these words, spoken in the innocent tone of a 9-year-old trying desperately to please her tormentor, was devastating. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be simple recordings lay a sophisticated brainwashing operation designed to convince Sarah that her captor was her protector, her provider, her new reality. The hidden truth these tapes revealed was that Sarah's physical imprisonment was only part of the horror. The real crime was the systematic attempt to steal her very sense of self, to make her forget her real name, her real family, her real life. The decisions her captor forced her to make in these recordings, thanking him for food, expressing gratitude for his kindness, calling him by a paternal title, showed the depth of his psychological manipulation. But the revelations didn't stop there. The investigations, expansion beneath Pine Ridge Elementary itself, uncovered something that defied all architectural logic. Under the old auditorium stage, investigators discovered yet another hiding space where Sarah had been held. This wasn't just a single room. It was part of an elaborate network of interconnected chambers that had been carefully constructed within the very foundation of the school. The transformation this discovery brought to the case was staggering. What they had initially believed was a single incident of captivity was actually part of a much larger, more sophisticated operation. The crawl space contained a makeshift living area complete with a cracked mirror, yellowed blankets, and a rusted lantern that had provided the only light in Sarah's underground prison. Most significantly, they found her missing black patent leather school shoe, the one that had been on her foot when she walked into that photography session 30 years earlier. The impact of realizing that Sarah had been moved through this network of hidden chambers, possibly for weeks or even months, was profound. The journey through these spaces revealed loose bricks that connected to other areas, creating a maze-like system that allowed her captor to move undetected throughout the school's infrastructure. The mindset required to construct such an elaborate prison system spoke to years of planning and preparation. The search of Margaret Stone's property revealed the true scope of this conspiracy, transforming what investigators thought they understood about family loyalty and the decisions people make when faced with impossible choices. Hidden within Margaret's home office, investigators uncovered a collection of documents that painted a picture of premeditation so chilling it defied comprehension. The forged adoption papers listing Thomas Stone as Sarah's legal guardian represented a level of planning that went far beyond a crime of opportunity. These weren't hastily created documents. They were professionally crafted forgeries complete with official-looking seals and signatures. The hidden truth was that Thomas hadn't just planned to take Sarah. He had intended to legally possess her, to create an entirely new identity for both of them that would allow them to disappear forever. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was a handwritten notebook titled Princess Protocol. The impact of reading through this systematic guide to psychological manipulation was profound. Page after page, detailed daily schedules for conditioning, specific techniques for memory suppression, and step-by-step instructions for breaking down a child's sense of self. The mindset behind such meticulous planning revealed someone who had studied child psychology not to help children, but to destroy them from within. The transformation Rodriguez witnessed when Margaret Stone finally broke during interrogation was both satisfying and heartbreaking. Behind the scenes of what had appeared to be a dedicated teacher's life lay decades of fear, guilt, and terrible family secrets. Margaret's confession revealed the complex web of enablement that had made Sarah's disappearance possible. The fact that you stayed through Sarah's entire journey tells me you're exactly the kind of person this channel was created for. Subscribe if you want more stories told with this same level of care and detail. There are so many cases out there waiting for someone to listen, to dig deeper, to never give up on finding the truth. Under the pressure of overwhelming evidence, Margaret admitted she had known exactly who Thomas was and what he was capable of. The journey through her confession revealed that she had helped him secure the temporary janitorial position through a staffing agency, using her connections and reputation to vouch for someone she knew was dangerous. The decisions she made that day weren't born of ignorance. They were calculated choices to protect her brother at any cost. The revelation that Thomas had been calling children princess, since their own childhood added another layer of horror to the story. Margaret's admission that she had always been afraid of him, but felt obligated to help because family is family, exposed the twisted logic that had enabled decades of potential abuse. The impact of this revelation was staggering. How many other children had Thomas Stone encountered over the years? How many other princesses had there been? The hidden truth, Margaret's confession, revealed was that she had convinced herself that helping Thomas just this once would satisfy whatever darkness drove him. She claimed she thought he had left the school before lunch, that she never imagined he would actually take Sarah. But the evidence painted a different picture, one of willful blindness and deadly enablement. The investigation's journey into Thomas Stone's methods revealed a level of deception that was both brilliant and terrifying. The transformation from simple janitor to substitute teacher on the same day showed a sophistication that challenged everything investigators thought they knew about opportunistic crimes. Thomas hadn't just gained access to the school through his sister's connections. He had orchestrated multiple entry points, creating a web of false identities that gave him unprecedented access to children. The revelation that Jay Halpern, the substitute teacher who had worked in Sarah's classroom that very morning, was actually Thomas Stone, using falsified credentials belonging to Randy Clay, was staggering. The hidden truth was that Randy Clay was serving time in state prison during October 1994, making his identity the perfect cover for someone who understood how to exploit bureaucratic gaps. The mindset required to orchestrate such elaborate deception spoke to years of planning and practice. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a normal school day, students had sensed something was wrong with their substitute teacher. Decades later, former classmates still remembered the man who smelled like melted plastic and made them instinctively uncomfortable. The impact of these childhood memories became crucial evidence. Several students specifically recalled how Mr. Halpern had paid special attention to Sarah, engaging her in private conversations that seemed oddly intimate for a temporary teacher. The transformation this discovery brought to the timeline was profound. Thomas Stone hadn't simply grabbed Sarah during a moment of opportunity. He had spent the entire morning in her classroom, studying her behavior, gaining her trust, and positioning himself as a familiar authority figure. The decisions he made throughout that day revealed a predator who understood exactly how to exploit a child's natural inclination to obey adults, especially teachers. When investigators finally located Thomas Stone's abandoned pickup truck, they uncovered evidence that provided insight into his twisted psychological methods. The notebook found beneath the driver's seat contained entries that revealed his systematic approach to breaking down children's sense of reality. His writings described techniques for keeping children still and convincing them that the world had ended, and only he remained as their protector and provider. But perhaps the most powerful discovery was a single entry written in a child's shaky handwriting. "I am not your daughter. I am Sarah Marie Collins. My mother is real. I will not forget." The impact of reading these words, clearly written by Sarah herself, was overwhelming. The hidden truth they revealed was that despite months of psychological manipulation, despite being isolated from everything familiar, Sarah had never completely surrendered her identity. The journey through Sarah's resistance, documented in her own words, showed a strength that defied comprehension. Even as a 9-year-old child facing unimaginable circumstances, she had found ways to fight back, to maintain her sense of self, to leave evidence of who she really was. The mindset of survival and resistance she displayed challenged every assumption about what children are capable of enduring. The transformation in understanding came when forensic experts took a closer look at the lighting and background details in frame 25. The revelation that would emerge would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about where Sarah had been held. The distinctive greenish tint of the light wasn't coming from school fluorescents. It was the unmistakable glow of industrial skylights filtering through decades of grime and neglect. Behind the scenes of this photographic analysis, experts were comparing every detail against known locations throughout Wisconsin. The breakthrough came when a retired state inspector recognized the painted tree murals visible in the background. The mindset shift was immediate and profound. Frame 25 hadn't been taken at Pine Ridge Elementary at all. Sarah had been photographed at a place called the Daylight Institute, an abandoned behavioral research facility that had been shuttered in 1992 for conducting unethical experiments on children. The impact of this discovery was staggering. The Daylight Institute had operated under the guise of helping troubled children, but investigations in the early 1990s had revealed systematic abuse disguised as therapy. The hidden truth was that Thomas Stone had somehow gained access to this perfect location for his crimes, a place already designed to contain and control children, now abandoned and forgotten by the outside world. The journey to the Institute's room D4 felt like stepping back in time into a nightmare that had been preserved in decay. Everything matched Frame 25 exactly, the industrial skylights casting that eerie green glow, the foam insulation lining the walls, and those same painted tree murals that were supposed to create a calming environment, but instead became the backdrop for unthinkable horrors. But what investigators found carved into the foam walls of room D4 would become the most powerful evidence of Sarah's incredible strength, the decisions she had made in her darkest moments, when she had every reason to give up hope, revealed a spirit that refused to be broken. Scratched deep into the insulation, investigators found messages that took their breath away. "My name is Sarah. I am real. I am not yours. I remember." The transformation these words represented was profound. Despite months of psychological manipulation designed to erase her identity, despite being told repeatedly that her family was gone and that Thomas was her only reality, Sarah had fought back in the most fundamental way possible, by refusing to forget who she was. Another message carved nearby read, "They took my voice, but not my name." The impact of reading these words, knowing they were etched by a 9-year-old girl fighting for her very sense of self, was overwhelming. The mindset, required to maintain such resistance in the face of systematic brainwashing, spoke to a strength that defied every assumption about what children could endure. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be complete victimization, Sarah had been waging a war for her identity, leaving these messages as proof that some part of her could never be conquered. The investigation's journey took an unexpected turn when experts began analyzing the directional scratches Sarah had carved alongside her identity. Messages, what appeared to be random markings, were actually crude maps, showing pathways and connections that seemed impossible within the confines of the Daylight Institute. The transformation in understanding came when Rodriguez realized these weren't just desperate scratchings. They were navigation guides. Hit that like button if you believe some stories are too important to tell carelessly. Your like isn't just support for the video. It's support for giving voices to survivors like Sarah and ensuring their incredible strength gets recognized. These stories deserve to be heard. Following Sarah's carved directions led investigators to discover an extensive network of abandoned transit tunnels beneath the city's freight yard. The hidden truth was that Thomas Stone had been using these forgotten passages to move Sarah between locations without detection. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a single location crime, he had actually created an entire underground transportation system for his horrific purposes. The mindset required to exploit these tunnels showed Thomas's deep knowledge of the city's infrastructure. Investigation revealed he had obtained legitimate plumbing permits under various false identities, giving him legal access to explore and map these underground spaces. The impact of this discovery was staggering. He hadn't just stumbled upon the perfect hiding place. He had systematically prepared an entire network of safe houses connected by tunnels that few people even knew existed. In one of these underground chambers, investigators made a discovery that would prove Sarah's incredible resilience once again. Hidden beneath loose stones was a small diary, written in Sarah's careful child's handwriting, documenting not just her captivity, but her strategies for survival. The decisions she made to hide this evidence showed a level of planning and hope that defied comprehension. Page after page revealed her resistance to the psychological manipulation, her techniques for maintaining sanity, and, most remarkably, her detailed observations of Thomas's routines and vulnerabilities. But the transformation that would reshape the entire investigation came from the forensics lab. DNA analysis from multiple locations confirmed Sarah's presence throughout the network of hiding places, creating a timeline of her movements over what appeared to be months or even years. However, the revelation that would send shockwaves through the investigation team was the dating of some DNA samples. They were only 2 years old. The impact of this discovery was beyond anything Rodriguez had prepared for. The journey from cold case to active investigation happened in an instant. Sarah Collins wasn't just a victim from 30 years ago. If the DNA evidence was accurate, she was potentially still alive, now a woman in her late 30s, somewhere out there in the world. The mindset shift was profound. This was no longer about bringing closure to a historical tragedy, but about finding a living person who might still need rescue. Behind the scenes of what everyone had assumed was a decades-old murder case, the hidden truth was emerging that Sarah's story might still be unfolding. The decisions made 30 years ago had created a timeline that extended into the present, transforming every assumption about survival, captivity, and the power of human resilience. The transformation from theoretical possibility to concrete reality came when Rodriguez's team began cross-referencing missing person reports from recent years. The journey through hospital records and psychiatric evaluations revealed a pattern that made their hearts race with both hope and dread. In 2022, Riverside Medical Center had admitted an unidentified woman whose behavior and physical description aligned perfectly with what an adult Sarah Collins might look like after decades of trauma. The mindset required to recognize the connection wasn't immediately obvious. The woman appeared to be in her late 30s, malnourished, with prematurely gray hair and the haunted demeanor of someone who had experienced prolonged psychological abuse. But the hidden truth lay in her specific behaviors and the phrases she repeated during her brief stay. Hospital staff noted that she spoke constantly about rooms that moved and games you can't stop playing, language that eerily echoed the psychological manipulation techniques documented in Thomas Stone's notebooks. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a routine psychiatric admission, this woman displayed survival behaviors that perfectly matched what someone with Sarah's history might develop. She refused to sleep in the hospital bed, instead curling up underneath it where she felt safer. The impact of witnessing such deeply ingrained trauma responses was profound for the medical staff, though they couldn't have known they were potentially treating one of America's most famous missing children. Perhaps most telling was her insistence on only eating food served in plastic containers, never accepting anything on plates or in bowls. The decisions driving such specific behaviors spoke to years of conditioning and control that had created unbreakable patterns of mistrust. After 72 hours of evaluation, she simply vanished from the hospital, leaving behind only questions and a growing certainty among investigators that they had found their first concrete lead. The revelation became even more compelling when Rodriguez discovered a forest ranger's report from just months earlier. Near Lake Superior Forest Reserve, Ranger Mike Harrison had encountered a woman matching the same description, wandering the trails and asking strange questions about rooms and searching for the place with the red door. The transformation this sighting represented was staggering. If this was indeed Sarah, she wasn't hiding in some urban shelter or institution. She was actively searching for something. The journey through the ranger's detailed observations painted a picture of someone who had survived against impossible odds but remained trapped by her past. Harrison described a woman who moved like someone constantly watching for pursuit, who flinched at sudden sounds and who possessed an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings. When he told her there were no buildings in that area of the forest, she had simply nodded and walked back into the woods, disappearing as silently as she had. Yarn arrived. The journey to locate the place with the red door became an obsession for Rodriguez and her team. Using the forest ranger's detailed description and topographical maps, they scoured thousands of acres of dense woodland until they found something that made their hearts stop. Deep in a forgotten corner of the forest, nearly invisible beneath overgrown vegetation, stood a small cabin that appeared abandoned except for one startling detail: a bright red door that had been recently painted, its vibrant color stark against the weathered wood surrounding it. The transformation this discovery represented was immediate and profound. The mindset shift from theoretical search to concrete reality hit the team like a physical force. Behind the scenes of what should have been a routine missing person investigation, they were about to confront the living aftermath of one of the most complex criminal cases in recent memory. The decisions they made in the next few minutes would determine whether 30 years of questions would finally receive answers. The impact of stepping inside that cabin was unlike anything Rodriguez had experienced in her career. What they found wasn't simply a hideout or refuge, it was a carefully curated museum of trauma. Every room contained relics from different phases of Sarah's captivity: the pink blanket from the hidden school chamber, photographs from the Daylight Institute, sketches and maps from the underground tunnels. The hidden truth was that someone had been collecting and preserving evidence of every location where Sarah had been held, creating a twisted shrine to her stolen childhood. The journey through these displays revealed a level of psychological complexity that defied comprehension. Each artifact was positioned with museum-like precision, as if someone had been trying to reconstruct and make sense of decades of horror. The transformation from victim to curator was evident in every carefully placed object, showing how survival sometimes requires creating meaning from meaninglessness. But the revelation that would change everything came when they climbed the narrow stairs to the cabin's upper level. In a small bedroom at the back of the house, they found her, Sarah Collins, now 39 years old, alive but bearing the unmistakable marks of prolonged trauma. Her once golden hair had turned prematurely gray, her frame was painfully thin, and her eyes held the watchful wariness of someone who had learned that safety was always temporary. The impact of that moment when their eyes met was indescribable. Rodriguez felt 30 years of questions, guilt, and determination crystallize into a single moment of recognition. Sarah looked directly at her and said something that would haunt Rodriguez forever. "You remembered." The hidden truth in those two words was staggering. Sarah had been deliberately leaving clues throughout her captivity, hoping against hope that someone would eventually piece together the evidence she had so carefully preserved. The transformation Rodriguez experienced when she fully took in Sarah's living situation was both relief and horror. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light of the cabin's bedroom, she noticed something that made her stomach turn. In the corner, beneath yellowed blankets on an old bed, lay what remained of Thomas Stone. His decomposed body had been there for months, half his face burned away by what appeared to be a fire that had occurred years earlier. The hidden truth was that Sarah had been living alone with her deceased captor, yet somehow still remained psychologically imprisoned by his presence. The impact of witnessing Sarah's reaction to the body was profound. Despite the obvious reality of Thomas's death, Sarah kept glancing nervously toward a cracked mirror on the wall, pointing and whispering that he's still there. The mindset required to understand her condition became clear. 30 years of systematic psychological manipulation had created a prison that existed entirely within her own mind. The decisions that had shaped her survival had included creating an internal version of her captor that continued to control her behavior even after his physical death. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be freedom, Sarah remained trapped by the voices and rules that had been systematically programmed into her consciousness. The journey from physical captivity to psychological imprisonment showed how trauma can create chains that are invisible but unbreakable. Rodriguez realized that finding Sarah alive was only the beginning of an incredibly complex rescue operation that would require unraveling decades of conditioning. But the revelation that would provide the most insight into Sarah's incredible strength came when investigators noticed she was clutching something protectively against her chest. It was the original camera from 1994, the same disposable model she had been given 30 years earlier. The transformation this represented was staggering. She had somehow managed to keep this single piece of evidence safe through 3 decades of captivity and psychological abuse. When the camera was carefully developed, it contained one final, undeveloped frame, frame 30. The image showed the red door from the inside, tightly closed with desperate fingernail scratches carved deep into the wood, spelling out a single word over and over again. Enough. The impact of seeing this final photograph was overwhelming. It represented Sarah's ultimate act of resistance, her determination to document the moment when she decided that 3 decades of suffering had reached its limit. The mindset required to take that photograph, to preserve that evidence, to continue fighting even when freedom seemed impossible, spoke to a strength that defied every assumption about human endurance. The hidden truth Frame 30 revealed was that Sarah's survival hadn't been passive. It had been an active campaign of resistance that culminated in this final declaration of defiance. The journey of bringing Sarah out of that cabin required a level of sensitivity and expertise that few rescue operations ever demand. The transformation from captive to free person couldn't happen in an instant. 30 years of conditioning had created reflexes and fears that made even the simplest acts of kindness seem threatening. Rodriguez and her team moved with incredible patience, allowing Sarah to make each decision about leaving at her own pace, understanding that forcing her would only recreate the trauma she had endured for decades. The mindset shift required for Sarah's initial treatment at Riverside Medical Center was profound for everyone involved. Behind the scenes, specialists in long-term trauma worked around the clock to create an environment that felt safe rather than institutional. The impact of Sarah's first interactions with medical staff revealed just how sophisticated her survival strategies had become. She had learned to read micro-expressions, to detect the slightest changes in voice tone, to anticipate danger from the most innocent gestures. But the moment that gave everyone hope came when a gentle trauma counselor asked Sarah if she remembered her mother. The hidden truth that emerged in Sarah's response was nothing short of miraculous. Despite 3 decades of systematic attempts to erase her past, despite being told repeatedly that her family was dead and that Thomas was her only reality, Sarah nodded slowly and whispered, "I remember her voice." The transformation this represented was staggering. Somewhere deep within her psyche, the core of who Sarah Collins really was had never been completely destroyed. The decisions Sarah had made throughout her captivity to preserve these essential memories became clear as investigators continued exploring the cabin and reviewing her extensive documentation. The revelation that would astound psychologists and law enforcement experts alike was the discovery of Sarah's incredible record-keeping system. She had created detailed maps of every location where she had been held, scratching them into walls, hiding them in crevices, even memorizing architectural details that would prove crucial to understanding the full scope of her captivity. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be complete victimization, Sarah had been conducting her own investigation. Her survival strategy involved not just enduring each day, but actively collecting evidence and maintaining detailed mental records of everything she observed. The mindset required to think beyond immediate survival toward eventual rescue showed a level of hope and determination that defied comprehension. The impact of discovering these hidden records was profound. Sarah had left breadcrumbs throughout her journey, not just the obvious messages carved into walls, but subtle markings, hidden photographs, and coded references that only someone with her specific experiences would understand. The transformation from victim to active participant in her own eventual rescue challenged every assumption about what captivity survivors are capable of achieving. The investigation's journey through Sarah's evidence network revealed a level of strategic thinking that challenged every assumption about what a child could accomplish under such horrific circumstances. The transformation from simple survival to systematic documentation showed a mind that refused to accept defeat, even when faced with impossible odds. As investigators followed Sarah's carefully placed clues, they realized they weren't just uncovering evidence of her captivity. They were following a master plan that had taken 30 years to complete. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be random hiding places, Sarah had created an interconnected web of evidence that spanned multiple states and decades. The mindset required to maintain such an elaborate system while under constant psychological pressure was staggering. She had hidden photographs in the walls of the Daylight Institute, buried written records in the underground tunnels, and even managed to smuggle audio recordings between locations. The impact of discovering this network was profound. Sarah hadn't just been surviving. She had been building the case that would eventually lead to her own rescue. The decisions Sarah made about what evidence to preserve and where to hide it revealed a sophisticated understanding of investigation. Techniques that seemed impossible for someone who had been isolated since childhood. Each hiding place contained different pieces of the puzzle, but when assembled together, they created a comprehensive timeline of her captivity that was more detailed than anything law enforcement could have developed on their own. The hidden truth was that Sarah had become her own detective, her own advocate, her own hope for justice. The revelation that emerged from analyzing the recovered tapes and documents was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire case. The psychological manipulation techniques Thomas Stone had employed were sophisticated beyond anything most experts had ever encountered. The transformation these recordings revealed was a systematic attempt to completely erase Sarah Collins and replace her with someone who would be grateful for her captivity, dependent on her captor, and convinced that the outside world no longer existed. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be simple abuse lay a carefully orchestrated campaign of mental warfare designed to break down every aspect of Sarah's identity. The impact of hearing these recordings was devastating. They revealed techniques borrowed from military interrogation, cult indoctrination, and experimental psychology, all adapted specifically to control a child's developing mind. The journey through these materials showed how Thomas had attempted to convince Sarah that her memories of her family were fantasies, that her name was something he had given her, and that her very existence depended on his approval. But the most remarkable revelation was how completely Sarah had resisted this mental subjugation. Despite being captured at an age when identity is still forming, despite years of isolation and manipulation, she had somehow maintained enough of her core self to eventually break free psychologically. The mindset required to resist such systematic brainwashing spoke to a strength that defied every assumption about human vulnerability and resilience. The transformation in understanding came when investigators began examining not just what Thomas Stone had done, but how the systems designed to protect children had catastrophically failed. The journey through institutional records revealed a web of negligence that was almost as disturbing as the crime itself. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a single teacher's betrayal lay systemic failures that had created the perfect environment for a predator to operate undetected for years. The mindset shift was profound when Rodriguez realized that Margaret Stone's cover-up was just the tip of the iceberg. The investigation revealed that Pine Ridge Elementary, like many schools in the 1990s, relied on inadequate background checks for temporary workers. The impact of this discovery was staggering. Thomas Stone had exploited bureaucratic gaps that existed throughout the educational system. The decisions made by administrators to prioritize convenience over security had created vulnerabilities that a sophisticated predator could easily manipulate. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be isolated incidents, investigators discovered that Thomas had been testing and exploiting these weaknesses for years before Sarah's disappearance. The hidden truth was that the support systems designed to protect children, background checks, reference verification, supervisor oversight, were riddled with holes that someone with his patience and planning could navigate with ease. The transformation from random crime to systematic exploitation became clear as investigators traced his movements through multiple school districts. The revelation that would shake the educational community to its core was the discovery of Thomas Stone's extensive identity network. The journey through his false documentation revealed at least 6 different personas he had used to gain employment in schools and child-related facilities. The mindset required to maintain such elaborate deception showed a level of sophistication that challenged every assumption about how predators operate. Each identity came complete with convincing documentation created by a network of associates who specialized in identity fraud. The impact of realizing how easily he had moved between schools, sometimes working in multiple districts simultaneously under different names, was devastating. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be legitimate employment lay a carefully orchestrated campaign that had allowed him access to hundreds of children over the course of decades. The decisions Thomas made about which identities to use were revealed strategic thinking that was both brilliant and terrifying. He understood exactly how to exploit the fragmented nature of background check systems, knowing that school districts rarely communicated with each other about temporary workers. The transformation from opportunistic predator to systematic infiltrator showed how someone with his knowledge and patience could turn the very institutions meant to protect children into hunting grounds. The transformation forensic teams experienced as they pieced together Sarah's evidence chain was unlike anything in criminal investigation history. The journey through 7 different locations across multiple states revealed a timeline that spanned not just Sarah's captivity, but decades of meticulous planning and incredible resilience. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be random movements, investigators discovered that Sarah had been deliberately leaving a trail of evidence so comprehensive that it would eventually become the roadmap to her own rescue. The mindset required to understand Sarah's strategy was profound. Each location contained evidence that had been carefully preserved and strategically placed, showing her understanding that documentation would be crucial for her eventual rescue. The impact of realizing that a 9-year-old child had developed such sophisticated survival techniques was staggering. The decisions she made about what to preserve, where to hide it, and how to ensure it would survive decades of neglect revealed a level of strategic thinking that challenged every assumption about childhood cognitive development. The hidden truth that emerged from analyzing this evidence chain was that Sarah had never stopped fighting. Despite 30 years of captivity and systematic psychological abuse designed to break her spirit, she had continuously worked to maintain her true identity and preserve proof of her experiences. The transformation from victim to active participant in her own eventual rescue showed a strength that defied comprehension. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be complete subjugation, Sarah had been conducting her own investigation. Her resistance included keeping detailed diaries written in code, leaving messages scratched into surfaces that would be preserved by time, hiding photographs in places only she would remember, and creating maps that documented not just her physical movements but the psychological journey of her captivity. The impact of discovering these materials was overwhelming. Each piece revealed another layer of her incredible determination to survive and eventually be found. The journey through Sarah's documentation revealed techniques that were both heartbreaking and inspiring. She had learned to hide evidence in ways that would protect it from discovery by her captors while ensuring it would eventually be found by investigators. The mindset required to think decades ahead, to plan for rescue while enduring daily trauma, spoke to a hope that refused to die despite every reason to surrender. The revelation that Sarah had understood from the very beginning that her survival depended not just on enduring each day, but on preserving evidence for future justice, transformed the entire understanding of what captivity survivors are capable of achieving. Her methods evolved over the years, becoming more sophisticated as she learned from each location and adapted to new circumstances. The transformation in the Collins family home over 30 years was both heartbreaking and inspiring. While the world around them changed and evolved, Sarah's bedroom remained exactly as she had left it on that October morning in 1994. Her blue dress with the flower buttons still hung in the closet, her stuffed animals arranged on the bed just as she had positioned them before school. The mindset required to maintain such hope for 3 decades, to resist the well-meaning advice to move on and let go, revealed a family bond that refused to accept defeat. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a typical suburban home lay the headquarters of an unrelenting search operation. Valerie Collins had transformed her grief into action, becoming one of the most prominent advocates for missing children in the region. The impact of her work extended far beyond Sarah's case. She had helped establish search protocols, lobbied for improved Amber Alert systems, and provided support to hundreds of other families facing similar nightmares. The decisions Valerie made to channel her pain into purpose had created a legacy that would outlast any individual case. The journey through Valerie's advocacy work revealed how one mother's refusal to surrender had kept Sarah's case alive in the public consciousness. Her relentless efforts to keep Sarah's story in the media, to remind investigators that her daughter was still out there somewhere, had been crucial in ensuring that when David Morrison finally developed that forgotten roll of film, the right people were ready to act immediately. The hidden truth was that Sarah's eventual rescue was as much the result of her mother's unwavering determination as it was of her own incredible resistance. The transformation that occurred within the Pine Ridge community was equally profound. What had started as a typical small town became a laboratory for child protection innovations. The impact of Sarah's disappearance had motivated residents to become experts in school security, background verification, and stranger danger awareness. Behind the scenes of community meetings and school board sessions, ordinary parents had educated themselves about predator behavior and institutional vulnerabilities that most people never consider. The decisions made by the Pine Ridge community in response to Sarah's case had created ripple effects that extended throughout the state. Schools implemented comprehensive background check systems for all temporary workers, established buddy systems for children during transitions, and created communication protocols that ensured no child could disappear without immediate detection. The mindset shift from "it won't happen here" to "we must be prepared" had fundamentally changed how educational institutions approached child safety. The revelation that emerged over the years was how Sarah's story had become a catalyst for reforms that protected countless other children. Her case study was taught in law enforcement academies. Her family's advocacy methods were replicated in communities across the country, and the investigative techniques developed during her search became standard protocol for missing person cases. The transformation in investigative capabilities between 1994 and 2024 proved to be the key that finally unlocked Sarah's case. The journey through modern forensic techniques revealed how technology had evolved to solve mysteries that would have remained buried forever just a generation earlier. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be breakthrough detective work lay the marriage of cutting-edge science with Sarah's incredibly preserved evidence, creating possibilities that investigators in the 1990s could never have imagined. The mindset shift that occurred when forensic teams applied DNA analysis to evidence that had been sitting in storage for 30 years was profound. The impact of discovering that microscopic traces could tell stories across decades transformed the entire approach to cold cases. Ground-penetrating radar revealed hidden chambers that traditional searches had missed, while digital photo enhancement extracted details from frame 25 that would have been invisible to the naked eye in Morrison's original darkroom. The decisions made to combine these modern techniques with Sarah's carefully preserved evidence created a perfect storm of revelation. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be random technological advances, investigators realized they were witnessing the evolution of justice itself. The hidden truth was that Sarah's incredible foresight in preserving evidence had positioned her case to benefit from every technological breakthrough that would emerge over the following decades. But the revelation that would send shockwaves through the legal community came with Margaret Stone's arrest and charging. The transformation from respected educator to criminal defendant was swift and devastating. Margaret faced charges of accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice for her role in covering up her brother's presence at the school. The impact of seeing someone who had dedicated her career to children being led away in handcuffs was profound for everyone who had trusted her with their most precious possessions. The journey through Margaret's legal proceedings revealed the complex web of accountability that surrounds institutional failures. The decisions she had made 30 years earlier to protect her brother at the expense of her students were finally facing consequences. But behind the scenes of this individual case, a much larger investigation was beginning to unfold. The mindset required to confront the possibility that Thomas Stone might have been involved in other disappearances was both necessary and terrifying. The hidden truth emerging from case file reviews was that his sophisticated identity network and decades of access to children suggested a pattern of predation that potentially spanned multiple states and countless victims. The transformation from solving one case to potentially uncovering a serial predator changed the entire scope of the investigation. The transformation Sarah experienced in her healing journey was unlike anything trauma specialists had ever encountered. The mindset required to help someone rebuild their sense of self after 30 Years of systematic psychological manipulation demanded entirely new therapeutic approaches. Behind the scenes at Riverside Medical Center, teams of experts worked around the clock to develop treatment protocols specifically designed for long-term captivity survivors, understanding that Sarah's case would likely become the foundation for helping future victims. The impact of witnessing Sarah's initial therapy sessions was profound for everyone involved. The decisions she made about which memories to trust, which voices in her head belonged to her authentic self versus her conditioned responses, revealed the incredible complexity of her psychological landscape. The journey through her healing process showed how decades of conditioning had created layers of false programming that would take years to carefully unravel. But the revelation that gave everyone hope was the discovery of Sarah's incredibly strong core identity. Despite 30 years of attempts to erase who she was, the foundation of Sarah Marie Collins had somehow remained intact. The hidden truth was that the same strength that had enabled her to resist complete mental subjugation would now power her recovery. The transformation from surviving captivity to reclaiming her authentic self became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a simple recovery process lay groundbreaking work in trauma therapy that would revolutionize treatment for captivity survivors worldwide. The mindset shift required for Sarah to differentiate between her true memories and implanted conditioning was extraordinary, but her progress gave hope to other survivors who had been told their cases were hopeless. The transformation of Pine Ridge Elementary itself became a powerful symbol of healing and prevention. The decision to convert the school into a children's resource center dedicated to trauma recovery and child protection transformed a place of tragedy into a beacon of hope. The impact of this conversion was immediate. Families from across the region brought children who had experienced trauma to receive care in a place that understood the deepest forms of suffering. The journey through the new facility revealed how Sarah's story had inspired comprehensive changes in child protection. But perhaps the most powerful element was the memorial wall, where Frame 25 was displayed alongside photographs of other missing children and survivors. The hidden truth this display revealed was that Sarah's incredible strength had become a source of inspiration for countless others facing their own impossible circumstances. The revelation that emerged from this memorial was profound. Sarah's photograph, once evidence of horror, had been transformed into a symbol of hope, showing visitors that survival was possible even in the darkest circumstances, and that rescue could come even after decades of waiting. The transformation that occurred in cold case departments across multiple states was unprecedented. The journey through Thomas Stone's various identities had opened investigative doors that had been sealed for decades. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a single rescue operation, Sarah's incredibly detailed records were becoming the key to solving cases that families had given up hope of ever resolving. The mindset shift from viewing these as isolated incidents to recognizing a pattern of systematic predation was both terrifying and liberating. For investigators who had been working these cases for years, the impact of Sarah's evidence network extended far beyond her own case. Her detailed observations of Thomas's methods, his psychological techniques, and his operational patterns were helping investigators connect disappearances across multiple jurisdictions that had previously seemed unrelated. The decisions she had made to document every detail of her captivity, even when it seemed pointless, were now providing closure to families who had been searching for answers for generations. Behind the scenes of police departments throughout the Midwest, investigators were reopening files and comparing notes with a new understanding of how sophisticated predators operate. The hidden truth Sarah's case revealed was that the most dangerous criminals aren't the impulsive ones who make mistakes. They're the patient ones who plan for decades and exploit every weakness in the systems designed to protect children. But perhaps the most profound revelation was how Sarah's story had transformed the very concept of hope itself. The transformation from despair to possibility occurred in missing person cases across the country as families realized that if Sarah could survive 30 years and still be found, then their loved ones might still be out there too. The mindset shift was extraordinary. cases that had been classified as hopeless were suddenly being viewed through new eyes. The impact of Sarah's rescue rippled through law, enforcement academies, victim advocacy groups, and family support networks worldwide. Her story became proof that human resilience has no expiration date, that justice doesn't recognize statute of limitations when it comes to protecting children, and that the decisions we make to never give up can literally save lives decades later. The journey through Sarah's recovery and the ongoing investigations inspired by her case revealed something profound about the nature of hope itself. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be an impossible rescue, the hidden truth was that ordinary people, photographers developing old film, detectives refusing to close cases, families maintaining bedrooms for missing children, can create miracles through simple acts of persistent care and determination. Sarah's story reminds us that some battles are fought in silence, some victories take decades to reveal themselves, and some people possess a strength that defies every assumption about what human beings can endure. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, through every twist and revelation, then you understand that this isn't just about one case. It's about the power of refusing to let someone be forgotten. The fact that you're here, listening to stories like Sarah's, means you're part of something important. These aren't just true crime cases. They're reminders that behind every missing person poster, every cold case file, every family that refuses to give up, there are real people, whose stories deserve to be told with the respect and attention they deserve. If you found value in how we explored Sarah's incredible journey together, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. This is exactly the kind of deep, thoughtful storytelling you can expect. Cases that matter, told in a way that honors both the victims and the survivors. We dig deeper than headlines. We follow evidence wherever it leads, and we never forget that these are real people whose lives have been forever changed. Leave me a comment saying, "Hope survived," if you made it all the way to the end with me today. I read every single one, and knowing that you stayed for Sarah's complete story means everything. And if this conversation resonated with you, if you felt that connection we built together over these past minutes, a like would help this story reach other people who need to hear it. Sarah's voice deserves to be amplified. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly. Another case where the impossible became possible through sheer determination. Click and continue with me over there because some stories are too important to tell just once.